All right. Hey there, card folk and members of Tabletop Aces. Welcome to Product Design for Your Game. This is a seminar written by me, Rydon Vasse, also known as Speedrobo, for Tabletop Aces. For those of you who don't know, Tabletop Aces is a game designer networking group. There will be a link to join down in the description for our YouTube viewers at home. For everybody who doesn't know, who might be watching this later, this is a live seminar, so we have a group on Tabletop Aces here watching, and they will be asking questions throughout this seminar. And if you have any questions while watching this recording, leave them down in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them. So to get started, welcome. Who am I? Like I said, I'm Rydon Vasse. I'm the CEO of Speedrobo Games. Speedrobo Games is a indie tabletop games support and publishing studio. We've made a lot of different games in the past, and we've worked on a lot of different games in the past. Necromancer's Legacy's Allure, Rift Runners, System Gate, just to name a few. This seminar is to talk about what your next steps are going to be after you are done designing your game. So to talk about that a little bit more, I've got some assumptions of those watching going in. That you've made a game, that you've tested the game, you have all the assets for your game. This is things like artwork, graphic design, you know what is, like what all the pieces you need for your game, your meeples, you've got all that planned out. You're already fairly familiar with game design and the game market in general. This means that, maybe you've made a couple TCGs at home with the boys and shared them with your friends at locals, and that you've played a lot of games, you've been to multiple different game stores, you kind of have a pretty good feel for the tabletop gaming space in general. And my last assumption is that you've already built up some level of community and player base for your game. This doesn't have to be big, it can be like half a dozen boys that you go and get drinks with, and then you're like, hey, I made this funny little party card game where like we crack it open, we shuffle the deck at the bar, deal cards to everybody, and then whoever loses has to take a shot. Even just that level of community is good enough to jump into this seminar. Does anybody have any questions so far?
Nope.
Awesome.
I would like to ask, of those things, which would you say is most important to have, like, locked in, ready to go?
That is a great question. The most important thing to have locked in, ready to go for the steps in this seminar is to have tested your game, made and tested your game. As long as you've done that, the rest of the seminar will still be useful for you, but these other steps you should have completed before doing anything that we're going to talk about today. Does that answer your question?
That absolutely answers my question. Thanks.
Excellent. So what we're mostly going to be talking about today is finding your genre. And when I say genre, I'm not talking about like fantasy, sci-fi, anime, anything like that. We're talking about, another way to say this would be business model. In a sense, we're talking, is your game a board game, a card game, an RPG, or a war game? And these are the four like overarching genres of tabletop games that I've picked to specifically highlight today. There are subgenres within each of these. So for example, subgenres within card game would be party card game like Apples to Apples or Cards Against Humanity. There would be trading card game. These would be things like Magic the Gathering or Flesh and Blood. And then, of course, there's the expandable card game, which is what my company specializes in. These would be games like Android Netrunner, Arkham Horror, so on and so forth. So why does this matter? Finding the genre for your game is your most important next step because it's going to help determine how you market your game, sell your game, manufacture your game, promote your game, and how your game's entire lifespan will look. This is, once you have made your game and you've already got people playing and you've got your community and you've covered all the assumptions I've already made, figuring out what your genre is the next vital step. Any questions on genre at this time? Excellent.
Nope.
So now we are going to mess with your perception of game genre, right? I'm sure that everybody here already has in their mind what each of these 4 genres means to you and what expectations you have of the genre. You probably also are already thinking about what games are in that genre. So we're going to play a little game here. Before I click to the next slide, we are going to, I'm going to say the game that's on that next slide, and I want you to tell me and have in your mind what genre you think that game is going to be. So we're going to start talking about Monopoly. What genre do you think Monopoly is?
It's a board game.
Board game.
You're wrong. It's actually a card game. See, Monopoly is sold as a board game, but it has constant expansions, collectible items with tons of bling, primarily uses cards and small tokens. It's a card game. We could absolutely, during the development phase of Monopoly, have sold this as a card game, because it fits so many of the genre expectations of card game. But because they chose the genre of board game for Monopoly, it's sold as a board game. It fits those conventions a bit more. But see, this is a great example of how even during like the base design phase of your game, there are multiple different genres it could fit into. So the next game we're going to talk about is Arkham Horror. I already mentioned that Arkham Horror is an expandable card game. However, it has a focus on co-op. It uses it uses a game board and meeples, so we could have absolutely sold Arkham Horror as a board game. The last game that I have to kind of like mess with your perception of genre is Warhammer 40K. I'll ask again, what genre do you guys think Warhammer 40K is?
I think it's a money extraction simulator.
That's a good one.
Board game.
Warhammer as a board game. I like that. I like Warhammer as a board game, and we definitely could have sold Warhammer as a board game, but I actually wanted to bring up that we could sell this as an RPG. It's sold as a war game, with, the miniatures, the rulers, all that jazz, but it's got a focus on player guidebooks with tons of backstory and world building. This could have been sold as an RPG. And then unfortunately, Two Lanes isn't here, but I did have another example here under your genre is what you make it. Like, you can choose what genre you think fits your game best. But, member of Tabletop Aces, Two Lanes, he's currently working on a game called Predator versus Prey. And when I first saw his game, my immediate genre assumption of it was, oh, this is a board game. But it's not. He's actually been building it to be an expandable card game, which is exactly what we're here to talk about today. With your game, you can make your game the genre you want it to be, but when you do that, you need to understand that different expectations and requirements come with each genre, and these are just a list of some of them. So board games typically focus on casual play with easy storage and no gameplay outside of the core gameplay. And what I mean by that is when the board game is in its box, you aren't thinking about it. When you open that box, then you're thinking about it. And the best way to kind of contrast this is if we talk about card games, right? There's a lot of gameplay outside of the game in a trading card game or expandable card game. There's deck building, there's looking up spoilers for the next expansion, there's preparing for tournaments, all of that, right? These are things that board games don't have that card games do. Card games have like a mid-level competitive play. They tend to be a little bit more luck-focused, and thus a little bit more casual, but still have very strong competitive scenes. And card games require you to have very basic components. People who play card games don't want to have to drag an entire briefcase just to sit down and play a single game. They want to take a deck of cards, a playmat, and maybe a handful of tokens, and that's it. For an RPG, this genre typically focuses on cooperative and asymmetric play, right? You've got your players, and then you've got the Dungeon Master. The Dungeon Master himself is still a player in the game, but he's playing a very different role from the actual player characters. RPGs focus on storytelling over raw mechanics. They're a lot more loosey-goosey, a lot more up to interpretation. A great example of this would be the Tales of Equestria My Little Pony tabletop roleplay system, where their entire skill system is, I don't know, man, make it up. Like, that's just it in the book of like, hey, discuss with your game master if you can have a skill that does this, and if they say yes, then guess what? That's what it does. An RPG will have dense rules for some players and very diet rules for others. If you're a player character in a tabletop RPG, you really just have to worry about what your character specifically does, but if you're the dungeon master, you have to worry about what every character and every monster and every environment does. Then for a war games are going to be extremely competitive. Long time commitments are 100% okay for a war game, right? Like with a card game, you want very small time commitments, but with a war game, playing a single game, taking a whole afternoon, 2 thumbs up, war gamers love that. They want to spend, months painting their army, making sure all their orcs are red because red go fast. Awesome. And war games are very focused on tactical play over anything else. While war games still can have luck elements such as dice rolls, you're rolling so many dice in a war game that like it ultimately just averages out at the end of the day, right? So these are all very important things to keep in mind with expectations. And you want to work with these expectations because it will help you market your game. If you know what players of the genre your game are expecting, you can specifically target that in your marketing. It will help you explain your game. If you're making a game and you want it to be a tabletop RPG, it definitely helps you explain the game by opening with, my game is a tabletop RPG. It is like these other tabletop RPGs. You will be familiar with the mechanics because I am a tabletop RPG. It will help others to find your game, right? If they go to Board Game Geek and they look up tabletop RPGs, yours will then be on that list, and that will help. And this is part of the reason why figuring out what genre you want to target is so important. It will help you find the price of your game as well, because there are price expectations in every genre. A good example is within the trading card game space, right? Starter decks are supposed to be $10 to $20. You can't really stray outside of those price barriers and expect it to go well. Booster packs are supposed to be between $3 and $7 on the very top end if you're like Lorcana, right? Straying outside of that's going to cause you to run into some problems, right? If you price yourself too low, you won't be able to make enough money to feed yourself. If you price your game too high, no one will buy your game. The game market is very saturated. It's a very competitive market. There's tons of new games coming out all the time. And so knowing what your genre is will help you figure out the price barriers for that game within that genre. And in general, it'll just help you know that you're on the right track, right? So if you're making a tabletop RPG and your tabletop RPG has like a bunch of, miniatures, painting outside of it that requires like rulers to slide across game maps, you might be thinking, hey, wait a minute, am I actually making a war game instead, right? These are things to think about while you're developing the game if you have a genre in mind. That's not to say you can't go outside of the expectations of your genre. A great example is Legacy's Allure. This is one of the games that I had worked on previously, and one thing that I found so interesting about the way Keith wanted to market this is he wanted to make a war game that went against the expectations of the war game genre. Legacy's Allure is designed to be extremely portable, have limited, gameplay outside of it. There's no miniatures even. And it was meant to be very fast to play. And I was like, okay, that's really interesting that he's using these genre expectations to say, hey, we're a war game that kind of breaks the mold. So it's not to say that you need to rigidly adhere to the expectations of your genre, but they're always important to keep in mind, because if you are breaking those expectations, that is going to be something important that you need to convey to your players and customers. And that's why I use Legacy's Allure as the example here. So once you've figured out what your genre is, Now's the time to do market research. This is going to be your next step. You need to look at games within your genre and look at games like your game that even exist outside of your genre. What did you like about those games? What did other people like? What components come in those games? What are the price? And the big thing is to talk to other people around those games and the people that play those games. Ask them, what did you like about this game? What didn't you like about this game? All of these things, and even ask them if they want to try yours. A very good resource to do this kind of market research is actually Board Game Geek. I know that it looks like a website from 2002. That's because it is, but it is still the number one database for board games and tabletop gaming in general. So just go to Board Game Geek, look at the genre you want your game to be, look at those games, and see what they're doing like your game and what they aren't doing like your game. And then take the time to look at other games that you think might be similar to yours outside of the genre. And maybe, just maybe, you might realize that, oh, hey, I actually picked the wrong genre for my game. Going with, say, a card game when what I really want to make is a board game might, damage me long term. So maybe I'll want to shift to being a board game. And that might require you to go back and change a few elements of your game design. But that's not a problem, right? Your genre influencing your game design and your game design influencing your genre is perfectly normal. And changing what genre you're targeting, what your business model is going to be, is also completely normal. And having that result in some game design tweaks is also very normal. So, product design. What is your genre and what expectations are you targeting, right? You don't have to target every expectation within your genre, but which ones specifically does your game latch onto? What comes in your box? What's your target price? How many SKUs, stock keeping units, will you have at launch? So this means how many different products are you going to offer? Like a good example is if we look at, say, the HoloLive OCG, right? That's currently being offered to game stores on distribution. What do they have at launch? They have 2 different starter decks available and a single booster set. So that means they have 3 stock keeping units. So if you're making a board game, maybe you have a regular edition and then like a deluxe edition. The regular edition comes with like little cheap plastic pieces, but the deluxe edition comes with metal pieces, right? Or maybe you're making an RPG and you've got the player handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, the monster manual, some maps and meeples pack, something like that, then you'd have 4 stock keeping units. If you're making a war game, you're going to have 15 billion stock keeping units because you sell each miniature individually, you know what I mean? So this is important to keep in mind as it will help you figure out how you're going to manufacture, what you're going to manufacture, and how you're going to price your game. Manufacturing research. How many copies do you think you can reasonably sell? Find a few different manufacturing options. Get a quote from those manufacturers, but do not commit. Shop around. Always talk to multiple people when it comes to manufacturing. Always get multiple different quotes. Get samples from them as well. Most manufacturers, if you ask, will send you a sample pack of a few of their different cards or components that you are interested in so that you can see and compare the quality between these. And definitely think about price versus quality and what you're really looking for. Sometimes it might be better to sacrifice a little bit on quality to have a better price point. Sometimes you might really say, no, this quality reduction is not acceptable no matter what the price is. I need to spend a little bit more to get the components I want. Check to see if the price of the product is half of the desired sale price. So what this means is whatever you are spending on manufacturing to get that finished copy in your hand, that should be half of what you're charging your customer. The reason why is that if you want your game to be in game stores, your discount should be 40 to 50% to that game store. As a game store owner, I can tell you that generally the discount I get from big box distributors like GTS and Southern is about between 40 and 25% off the suggested retail price. So with that in mind, if you're an indie game and you don't have any of that big box distribution, which odds are you will not, you need to give game stores like me a reason why we would pick up your product and support you, and a really good discount, like as basically a double my money kind of discount, is a reason why I would support you. And if you cannot get that price point correct, right? So like, you know what your suggested retail price should be because you've done your market research. You know what your manufacturing cost is going to be. If that manufacturing cost is not half of what you know that suggested retail price should be, then you should go back to market research and product design or find another solution, right? Maybe when you go back to this, maybe you do more market research and say, okay, with these components that I'm offering, I can offer a higher price point if I change my targeted genre to something else. Or maybe you realize, actually in my product design, I don't need 30 tokens in the box. 15 tokens will do just as well and will still make the game work and function. I can slash that component by half, thus dropping the price and getting us to where we need to be. Are there any questions so far?
I do have questions.
Yes.
I got two.
Yep, go ahead.
One really short, easy one. You've used the word meeple a lot. Could you define it?
So yes, a meeple is a little wooden or plastic guy that stands up and generally dances along a game board.
Excellent. My second question is, do you find games that kind of bridge two different genres, two different business models, something that might, say, appeal to both a wargamer and an RPG person, do better or worse than games that stick rigidly to one genre?
That is a really good question. I will let me think on that for a little bit. But I am going to say, in my experience, it depends on the scale that your project is at. If you are a major company working with a major IP, balancing two genre expectations can work really well. That can go very well for you. I think a good example of this would be Ravensburger's Disney's Villainous' The Board Game, where that product straddles the line between board game and card game very well. There's a lot of collectibles and promo drops and little fun things to pick up and think about and tweak with, outside the game. There's a lot of collectability and hype and excitement for the next expansion when it comes to Disney's Villainous by Ravensburger, that board game. But primarily it's a board game, right? There's no deck building outside of it. It comes in one box. Sure, it has expansions, but they're mostly board game-like expansions. And so I would say that is a product that's done a very good job of straddling two genres. But the reason why it's been able to pull that off so successfully is because it's backed by one of the biggest board game companies in the world, working with the biggest IP in the world outside of Hello Kitty and Pokemon, right? So with that context, I think that and I have found in my work, that if you are an indie game, especially if you're just starting out on your first project, you are going to have a much easier time managing your project if you just stick to one lane and focus on being really, really good at the one thing you want to be really, really good at, instead of trying to spin too many plates and end up dropping them. Did that answer your question?
That absolutely answered my question. Thanks.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I had a question actually. So you were mentioning, I think it was the VTuber card game that had two introductory decks and then a booster pack.
Yes. Yes,
am I
that's right.
remembering that right?
Yes.
Okay. So how are you determining the sort of MVP in that sense, right? So like, for instance, I have two out of ideally the 5 decks that I would like to have to like start with, right? In like a TCG or ECG space. If I had those 2 decks and I, finished the art for them and then I went to something like I went to start getting like those example products, or talking to manufacturers, etc. Is that kind of the point where you would expect to go to, looking at a publisher or like a Kickstarter, or is sort of the expectation that like all 5 of those would be ready at that point?
So, that is a step beyond generally what we're talking about today. However, I am very happy to answer that question. I would recommend that you would have all 5 of those decks ready to go. If that's going to be your launch lineup, and you're talking about going to a publisher to help you launch, or going to a Kickstarter to help you launch, and you want all 5 of those decks as your launch lineup, all 5 need to be absolutely 100% locked in, ready to go. We're talking like basically finished, ready to hit the print button, kind of ready to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the publisher or the Kickstarter, in that sense, are really just helping you with production and distribution, right? Not helping you to finish the rest. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
As a publisher myself, you would have to have a game that I would deem to be extremely special if I were to publish you without having your launch lineup finished.
Sure.
Yep. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Oh yeah. And anybody else at this stage? All right, then I'm gonna keep us going. So next, let's talk about a marketing plan. So how does your game meet the genre expectations, and how does your game subvert your genre? These things are gonna be the core of what makes up your marketing. Let's go back to Legacies Allure and let's talk about that. Legacies Allure's tagline is, it is like Legacies Allure as its like big tagline is that it is a card-based war game with no randomness. So even there, we're seeing us talking about the genre expectations of both war games and card games, because we brought up that it's card-based, right? In card games, you expect a lot of randomness, so we're saying there is no randomness. It's much more like a war game in that sense. But it's not like a war game in the sense that we use cards instead of miniatures. So that is a great example of talking about how do we meet genre expectations. We're all strategy. How do we subvert the genre? We use cards, not minis. What sets you apart from the rest of the games that you researched? Using Legacies Allure again, when we were doing market research, we looked at other games that were kind of like Magic the Gathering and Dota inspired. So we looked at Skytear. Skytear is like hardcore the MOBA board game card game, right? It's great. I actually think Skytear is extremely cool. But we then talked about, when we were, talking to people about it, it's like, we're like Skytear, but without the lanes. And people are like, oh, that sounds cool, right? So that's something that you want to talk about, of like, what sets you apart, and you want to keep that in mind. What makes you like those games? Those other games that you did research about, and you looked into, and you said, oh, this is kind of like my game, but it's not like it in this sense. What were the parts that you did really like, right? So in Skytear, one thing that we really liked was we really liked how streamlined the gameplay felt. And we're like, okay, so we want to really focus on how streamlined our game is as well. And that's part of what we talk about in regards to Legacies Allure, of like, it's very easy to pick up and play, and we can demo this game in about 5 minutes. And that was one of the things that I talked about when I went to conventions showing off Legacies Allure, is I'd flag people down and be like, hey, we're Legacies Allure, card-based war game, no randomness, 5-minute demo, show you the whole game. It's something to keep in mind. Like, what do you like about the other games around you? Who is your target market? Like, who are you trying to appeal to? Are you trying to appeal to, here's a phenomenal example, right? We look at Sorcery trading card game. It's so obvious who their target market is, and this is something Sorcery did incredibly well. They knew their target market. To put it in a way that might come off as a little mean, their target market is Magic boomers. We all know it. We all accept it, and I think that it's great that they are so locked in on that market, and they say, we don't worry about anybody else. Our target market is Magic boomers. If you liked early days Magic, you're going to love Sorcery. And if you're an indie game, it is very important to have that target market in your mind and target them like a laser of focus, because spreading that focus means that you're going to have to start fighting against big boy titans in the industry, and that is a losing battle. The next thing you need to do in your marketing plan is you need to build your community. You need to get out there and talk to people. Word of mouth is how games grow. There's no two ways about it. I promise you, everybody sitting here and watching this, you have at some point come across a Facebook, a Twitter, or an Instagram ad for some random Kickstarter TCG. I know you have. I have. All of my friends have. And at any point, has that social media ad ever convinced you to buy? Probably not. And that is just proof that the way you market out here is you get your own boots on the ground and you start talking to people. When you find those people and you talk to them, you are going to find people that say, yo, I love this game. This game is one of my favorites of all time. And then without you having to do anything, they are going to go talk to people about your game as well. And that is how it spreads and grows. And then once you have your marketing plan, you just got to execute it. And we've been talking about executing it here. Best way to execute your marketing plan? Talk to people. You just got to do it. Thank you. So this has been our seminar about product design, genre, and like your next immediate steps after you're done designing your game. I'm very on board with doing more of these in the future, doing a full seminar on marketing and how to launch your game, get it published, doing Kickstarter type seminars. All very interested to do. Just head on over to Tabletop Aces and let us know what you're wanting to see. I'm sure that we can also get some other great guest speakers on here. I know that Jacob has a lot of experience, and we have a bunch of other phenomenal developers in our community that I'm sure would be interested in doing talks like these in the future. So we will now open it to questions in a minute. I actually need to refill my water, so give me 30 seconds. I will be right back. All right, I am back, and I am re-plugged in. Any questions from the audience?
Yeah, I do have a question. When you're doing marketing, especially for, let's say, crowdfunding for like tabletop games, is the age range usually skew a little bit older than, say, what like a standard audience is at retail, like from going to a game store and stuff like that, compared to people that actually back games online on a crowdfunding platform?
Yes,
Do you have any experience with this?
That is an excellent question. So there's kind of two parts to it. So firstly, age range skewing a bit older online, absolutely yes. That is without a doubt what I've seen and I've experienced. You're going to generally get older people, more affluent people, and especially when it comes to Kickstarter, a lot of times you'll get a bunch of backers on like the higher end collectible tiers because they're the people with jobs and disposable income to spend on high-end collectibles. So that's generally what you're going to look for with Kickstarter. When you go to retail, you're going to see a lot more smaller level sales, especially if you get into game stores of like individual packs, individual starter decks, and that sort of thing. And those kinds of purchases tend to skew into the younger age range. The other thing to keep in mind in regards to your age range question is back when we were all younger, there were a lot more kids playing tabletop games, but it's kind of an undeniable fact at this stage that tabletop gaming is increasingly becoming an older person's hobby. So just in general over time, the age range for this industry and this market has trended older. Fewer kids are playing trading card games like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon these days. You know what I mean?
And when you mean older, is it like within the 20s to 30s, or are you saying 30 plus? Just out of curiosity.
Both actually. So the 20s to 30s are the people that grew up in the 2006 TCG boom when every cartoon on Cartoon Network had a card game, right? Especially if we're talking like the card game world, which is more of my area of expertise. And then in the 30 plus age range, that's where I mentioned them earlier, but the old school Magic players that have very much gravitated towards sorcery tend to lie, right? So that's sort of the age brackets that we're looking at.
If I could add, I also think it is, like we mentioned earlier, very dependent on your business model. I think, for example, war games, I think, tend to skew a lot older because they take a lot more of an investment, and they're oftentimes not an instant gratification style of game. Whereas I'd say actually one of the youngest skewing genres is RPGs due to their mass boom over the past like decade, thanks to Critical Role and Stranger Things and stuff like that. There's a lot of fresh young faces.
That is absolutely correct. Thank you for adding that context, Jacob.
I got you.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Any other questions?
I have more questions if someone else doesn't have
No,
one.
keep it coming. Keep it coming. We're here for you guys.
Okay, yeah. So, for let's say trading card games, right? There's the manufacturing part where it is, the cards, the boxes, and stuff like that. But is it challenging to find a manufacturer that can actually, let's say, package the boosters in certain rarity ratios and stuff like that, or is that not really a challenge with
that is actually incredibly easy to do. There are several companies that can do it. WJPC is frequently favored. Gameland, Hopes, Lawnshore, Lawn Pack, all of these manufacturers will absolutely do it. And trust me, you will be inundated with a entire Walmart plastic shopping bag of sample packs and business cards from these manufacturers that will want to do this to you if you go to a convention such as Gen Con or Origins or Gamma.
Okay.
So
is there any particular publisher that you, or not publisher, but manufacturer that you like support or like love above all the others? You have, like, a favorite?
Yeah. So that depends on the game you're making. Which. So, like, I would generally recommend Hopes. I've found I work with them very closely. I've found their quality and price to be some of the best. Gameland is also very good. I've worked with them before. WJPC is fine in a pinch. I mean, if you want to go with something that's tried and true, and a lot of other indies are doing it, I have not had good luck with WJPC's customer service or print quality. I've just personally not been a fan. But there's a reason why lots of people go with them, so they're worth reaching out to and price comparing and quality comparing and getting some samples from them. You might find that you really like them, and that's fine. But I would say Hopes is very good when it comes to cards, though there are less specific components they can do. Gameland is kind of your jack of all trades, master of none. They're pretty good at everything, can do a little bit of everything. Lawnshore and Lawn Pack are excellent if you are going to be ordering several thousand copies of your game. They really don't like to do minimum orders below 1,000. So there's pros and cons to all of them. But out of the Chinese board game printers that I have had experience with, I would say those are kind of the pros and cons to the ones that I have experience with.
Gotcha.
For community building, for let's say a crowdfunding campaign, for best practices, I know it varies on the game, is like how big of an audience should you build before you actually start a campaign?
So a really good
is it very...
Oh, that's a great question. So a really good barometer for this is if your Kickstarter, you'll have a coming soon page for your Kickstarter, a promotional page for it, if you will. You want no less than 100 followers on that page before you launch. Any less than that, and I generally have not seen good results. 500 is from the folks that I've talked in the field, is generally considered to be like the yeah, you're gonna do great number, like, so if you've got 500 followers, your Kickstarter is going to knock it out of the park. If you've got 100, you should be fine. If you have less than 100, keep marketing, keep building. That would be my recommend.
Unless, like, your goal's, like, really tiny.
Yeah, I mean, if you're only, if you're shot, if your big, aspiration is, I'm a little guy. I don't really care how big my game gets. I just kind of want to, get the funding to print a dozen copies of my RPG book. Then, like, at that point, that doesn't particularly matter too much. If you've got those dozen people who have all signed off and said, yeah, I want to buy a copy of your book, then that's a different story.
And for like 500 followers, is that say a range of, let's say they're raising 20K, 10K, or is it like 50K plus? Just out of curiosity.
Um,
For gold.
Generally that'd be in like the oh well, I mean it depends on the cost of your game, to be completely honest. But
Yeah.
what I have seen is, and this is the rough numbers, and sometimes it can be more, sometimes it can be less, but about 10% of those people who have clicked follow on your Kickstarter are going to convert into backers within the first 24 hours. So that should help you less keep in mind the amount of money you're going to make, because I don't know what your game's going to be priced at, and more of the amount of actual backers you'll get. So if you have 500 backers, you should be able to get 50 backers easily within the first 24 hours. If you have 100 followers, you should be able to get 10 backers easily within the first 24 hours. So if your project goal is a couple $1,000s, right, and you've got some high roller tiers, and you can reasonably expect that each of your 10 people that are going to back you day one is going to spend $200, maybe $250 on your game. Then if your goal's in the couple thousands, then you can be like, okay, 100 followers, we're definitely going to meet our goal within the first 24 hours. More than that, then you're going to want more followers. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that gets a ballpark idea for me. And then for like smaller manufacturing quantities, what's the usual MOQ for like manufacturers, or is it like completely varies?
It
Do you
varies.
know?
It depends from manufacturer to manufacturer. So, my company actually does do small scale manufacturing in the U.S., and our MOQ, minimum order quantity, for those watching at home, is about a dozen ish, depending on specifics and specs. But we're best for like prototyping stuff. If we're talking like full production, then generally your MOQ won't be lower than 500 from a lot of these major full-scale manufacturers. Sometimes you can get it to about 100 copies, maybe less, but that's very shaky.
Okay, gotcha.
I actually had a question because you mentioned earlier at this point you should have kind of all of your assets completed.
Yeah.
Um, is there like or do you have like kind of a nice reference for what those assets would be? Obviously, for like a card game, you need the art for the cards, but the kind of collateral outside of the cards themselves.
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer, because that varies from game to game and project to project. That's a very game dependent question, so unfortunately I don't think that's something I can answer all that well. But what I would say is you want to have all of the necessary things somebody would need to actually play your game done. Does that
Gotcha.
answer the question?
Yeah, so I think that obviously it's for a card game, the cards themselves, the
Cards
packaging, I
themselves.
assume, the rule book.
Packaging you don't really need ready, but you should have a good idea. What I would say is, let's use a random TCG as example. Let's say you're making
Sure.
a Stinky Poo Poo the TCG, right? So what you would need
Love
there
it.
is you would need the graphic design for the actual card template. You'd need the logo for your game to use as the card back. You need all the artwork for the cards. You need all the text and effects for the cards. You'd need your rulebook complete. You'd need your game mat complete. And you'd need any tokens that your game would require to be complete.
Gotcha. Yep, makes sense to me.
All right. Awesome. Anybody else?
Yeah, so out of based on your experience, what is kind of the best marketing channels for, let's say, tabletop and TCG game categories online. Because like one issue, this is my experience from like the video game space, is
Mm.
like physical conventions and stuff like that. Usually you don't get enough marketing on scale. That's usually for like reaching out to publishers or distributors. I don't know if it's the same applies to like the tabletop space.
Um,
So
that's a great question. So, yeah, generally speaking, in the tabletop space, I have found that conventions are actually a good place to like meet players and network. A lot of conventions, people are there to actually like play and try new games. So I've personally found that conventions are a pretty good avenue. Um, in general, though, again, this is something that very much varies from game to game, genre to genre. I have honestly had good luck just finding people on Board Game Geek. You know, when I go to Board Game Geek and I look up games, I'll then see, who's an active reviewer, who's talking about this, and maybe I'll send them a message, an email, reach out, say, hey, I see that you're an active reviewer. You've reviewed those games. I like those games too. In fact, I like those games so much. I'm making a game kind of like them. Are you interested in giving mine a shot? I'm looking for new playtesters. Let me know. Just kind of go around and talk to people is genuinely the best recommendation. There's no golden formula. There's no magic solution. It varies from person to person and game to game because each creator of each game has different skills when it comes to communication as well, and that means there's going to be different channels that you're better at. Maybe you're better at chatting to people through text messages than you are shaking hands and rubbing elbows at a convention, right? In that case, you're going to have better traction finding your community online. Or maybe you're just really awkward online. You can't really like tell tone or personality through text, and this whole like computer screen world kind of creeps you out a little bit. Then in that case, go to conventions, shake hands, talk to people, say, hey, my name's Bimbus Wimbus, and I made Stinky Poo Poo the TCG. It's really cool. Here's what's cool about it. You want to sit down and play around with me? That sort of thing, It depends. It depends from game to game and person to person.
Can I chime in on this?
Yeah, go
Yeah.
for it.
So just as someone who's got an active campaign going, so we've tried Facebook ads, IG ads. We were just at Collecticon Miami this past weekend, which is where we launched our campaign, and just working with a bunch of content creators. I found that like Facebook ads give me the least ROI. Um, IG is a little better. Actually, I think IG is a lot better than Facebook for whatever reason. But I think the best ROI has been having content creators, especially with a fair amount of following, kind of review your stuff. Some of them have been doing it, at no cost if you're nice and maybe you know them, but usually they're not that expensive. Like I've sponsored channels for a few $100 and they'll give me a little segue or something like that. And then in the convention, because we launched our Kickstarter during the convention, we actually had like 18 people that sat down, played the game, loved it, and literally just we had a QR code. Like they just opened up the campaign and backed it right there. Like one guy even backed it for like $2,500.
To kind of cut you off there, because we're gonna be wrapping up the Q&A section here, but yes, that is all correct and great insight, and that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? Of like, you mentioned that the actual like Meta ads, the Google ads, the Facebook ads, the Instagram ads, helpful-ish, but the best thing you can do, like you said, is talk to the different content creators, talk to the different people, talk to the people at conventions, and that's how you get ahead. So, like, yes, absolutely, I appreciate you adding that insight. Thank you. And I think we'll have time for like one more question, and then we'll be wrapping her up.
I'll just kind of fish mine if there's no one else has
Go
a question.
for
I was
it.
just wondering, like, if like Reddit, Twitter, or those type of like online communities, which one's like kind of the most effective from people's experience? I was just curious about that.
I would say from my experience, it's changed from game to game. Reddit worked well for Legacy's Allure. It didn't work well for System Gate. Twitter has worked well for Rift Runners. It didn't work well for Mafia Works.
Okay.
Kind of just you know, when it comes to marketing, a lot of it is a slot machine, to be completely honest. Sometimes it picks up, sometimes it doesn't. All right. And with that, thank you all for coming today. It was great to have you all. Really appreciate you. You've been a fantastic audience. I appreciate everybody's questions and additional insight on this. And we'll definitely be doing this in the future, and we'll be having this uploaded later for people to watch back. I've been Speedrobo, and we'll see you next time.